Alone and locked in a hotel room, this colorful rock star had just discovered that his wife was leaving him for another man. Unfortunately, this revelation was the last in a long line of psychological setbacks, a choosing to isolate himself from the world. He let the madness swallow him whole. Today we're going to tell his tale, covering a song written from his perspective in these last lucid moments. It's a story of a disillusioned musician's last contact with reality, and yet there may be a glimmer of hope. It's all coming up next on Professor of Rock. Hey music junkies, Professor of Rock, always here to celebrate the greatest artists and the greatest songs of all time. You know, if you've ever listened to certain concept albums, with the incense burning, in total isolation, you're going to dig this channel. I used to do that all the time in high school. Make sure that you subscribe below right now by clicking on the red button and checking the box so you never miss out on our interviews or stories. We also have a Patreon you're going to want to check out, and there you'll find an additional catalog of exclusive content made just for you. You can become an honorary producer and help us curate this music history. So while playing the last show of Pink Floyd's 1977 Animals tour, something snapped inside of Roger Waters. And in an uncharacteristic move, he lashed out at a fan near the stage. I guess this had been building for some time. Yeah, the tour had been long and exhausting, but something else had been bothering Roger Waters. There was an increasing divide between the band and the audience. As Floyd's popularity grew throughout the 1970s, so did the size of their venues. Intimate concerts gave way to arena rock. And these stadium showcases became less fulfilling. Said Waters about it, the people who you're most aware of at a rock show on stage are the front 20 or 30 rows of bodies. And in large situations where you're using what's euphemistically called festival seating, they tend to be packed together, swaying madly, and it's very difficult to perform under those situations with screaming and shouting and throwing things and hitting each other and crashing about, letting off fireworks. It was a constant frustration for Roger Waters, who really just wanted to connect with the audience. Instead, he felt totally alienated from them. And he imagined they felt the same way. So back to the show. Floyd was playing Olympic Stadium in Montreal. There were about 80,000 people, and the show had not gone very well at all. According to Roger Waters, there was a guy in the front row who was shouting and screaming. It's out of control. He and some others were pushing against the barrier, trying to start a riot. And finally, Waters had just had it. And in disgust, he actually spit on the guy. Guitarist David Gilmour had no idea that the concert had devastated Roger Waters so much, at least not until later. None of us were aware of it at the time, he said. I just thought it was a great shame to end up a 6-month tour with a rotten show. Now, after the incident, Roger Waters spent a lot of time brooding over the ills of fame, and he wondered how he had reached that point. It was from this downcast state that he began to write one of the greatest rock operas in history, The Wall. Said Waters, the starting point of this whole project was me feeling bad about being on a big stage and feeling that there was an enormous wall between me and the audience, albeit an invisible one, but one that I really felt was there. Over the next 10 months, Roger Waters meticulously crafted a 90-minute demo, which he then played for the band. In October of '78, they began working up this album together. That would take another 6 months. It wouldn't be until April of '79 that they would begin recording. And even then, there would still be a lot of rewriting until the November release date. In fact, Gilmour has said that the idea of The Wall was so big and there was so much Waters wanted to get across lyrically that it was a struggle to even fit it all on a double album. I guess good things come to those who wait, because the result was nothing short of triumphant. It was a rare artistic achievement. Not only did the album serve as an outlet for Waters' concert angst, but it would also become a defining commentary on the dangers of miscommunication and disconnection and isolation. Cinematic in scope, the album is just packed with masterful offerings, some of which have become, of course, classic rock radio mainstays, counted among the best Floyd has to offer, which is high praise indeed. Today we're examining a song that just may be at the crux of the entire record, and it served as an apt metaphor for Waters' concert experience. I'm talking about track 1 on the third side of this acclaimed double album, the breathtaking Hey You. Hey You. You know, the Wall is so ambitious and detail-oriented that it's easy to get lost in its symbolic elements, and even the idea of the wall itself can seem formidable. But really, the concept isn't too complicated. After all, a wall is a very simple thing. It's a structure designed to divide and keep things apart. For Waters' semi-autobiographical character, Pink, the wall is a psychological means of separating him from experiences and people in his life. They're just too painful or distressing to engage. Over the course of the record and his life, Pink builds this wall brick by brick, each one acting as a shield against unwanted interactions. As Pink's story unfolds, we realize pretty quickly that he's gone far beyond a healthy sense of self-preservation, to the point of total isolation. For Pink, this steady march to solitary confinement began early in life with the death of his father in World War II. An overbearing mother, and of course the cruel schoolmasters. By the time we reach side 2 of the album, Pink is an adult as well as a rock star, and he's thrown himself into all of its hedonistic possibilities that come with it. We also learn that although he's married, he's estranged from his wife, and with decades of bricks built up, he cynically asks, "What shall we use to fill the empty spaces? How should I complete the wall?" Spaces. Now, everything comes to a head when Pink discovers that his wife is having an affair. And he decides to put the last bricks in place to completely isolate himself from the world. The end of side 2 closes out with Goodbye Cruel World. And as Pink sings goodbye, the last brick is in place. Goodbye. Hey You then opens up side 3 with Pink mentally imprisoned behind his wall. Hey you, out there in the cold, getting low. Also mirroring this in the narrative, Pink has locked himself inside his hotel room. Now here I should point out that while Waters didn't mean or intend for the wall to be 100% autobiographical, this song actually bears some significant resemblance to his own life. In a 2009 interview, Waters said about Hey You, "It's about the breakup of my first marriage. All that misery and pain and being out on the road when the woman declares over the phone that she's fallen in love with somebody else. It's a complete disaster. Really, I could do nothing but go fetal and weep." Wow, no wonder Pink's pain feels so real, so sealed out behind a titanic barrier built from anguish and repressed emotion. A now frantic Pink searches for a way to reestablish contact with the outside world. Part of him is asking, wait, what have I done? But isolated in his own mind, we know he's talking to himself and that his cries for genuine human interaction are going to come up empty. With itchy feet and fading smiles, can you feel me? Yet, as bleak as his predicament is, we can't tear ourselves away, even hoping he will find his way back out. The songs start out with David Gilmour singing as the voice inside Pink's head. And as the song goes along, it follows a kind of pattern, with each stanza beginning with the words, "Hey You." Hey you, out there on your own. Though the phrase implies calling out to someone, no one specific is mentioned. Rather, each time Pink addresses nameless persons in some sort of hopeless or miserable situation. For example, following each of these scenarios, Pink then pleads for connection. Can you feel me? Would you touch me? Can you help me? Call out, would you touch me? However, these nameless would-be rescuers seem to be just as destitute as he is. I mean, this is Roger Waters' way of pointing out that all of us have our own human wreckage to contend with. and that suffering is the common connection to us all. The list of ailments include coldness, loneliness, getting old, itchy feet, and fading smiles, just for starters.
Standing in the aisles with itchy feet and fading smiles, can you feel me?
All these burdens seem to parallel his own state. In a cry to himself as much as to anyone else, Pink says, "Hey you, don't help them to bury the light. Don't give in without a fight."
Don't give in without a fight.
Now next, when Pink cries out to someone sitting naked by the phone, we encounter a multi-layered image. On a personal level, this points back to Pink's attempt to call his adulterous wife, yearning for reconciliation, or at least a physical connection.
Sitting naked by the phone, would you touch me?
But in a more general nakedness, it also symbolizes vulnerability. So he's crying for someone, anyone, to reach out to him, to be open with him, something that Pink has not been able to offer himself. Then just before launching into the guitar solo, Pink pleads for someone to open your heart and follows that with, "I'm coming home."
I'm coming home.
As for the musical interlude that follows, this is really, it's such an overwhelming, powerful sequence. Two things knock me out here. For one, David Gilmour's lead guitar takes on a personality all its own, rising higher and higher in frenzied desperation. As if Pink was trying to climb his way out of his new prison. But you get the sense that it's hopeless, because at the same time, the rhythm guitar just pounds away at your ears as this mounting and oppressive force, possibly representing the wall itself, suffocating and ruthlessly calling in all around him. It feels like a relentless march into madness. It's just so paramount, so brilliant. As the solo gives way to the bridge, Gilmour turns the vocal duties over to Waters, and that's all she wrote.
But it was only fantasy.
He described this part of the song as being sung by an outside onlooker. He said the middle of the song is sung by a third person who narrates the fact that he can't actually make contact. These observations made during the bridge not only work as a summary for the song, but possibly even for the entire story itself. It opens with the cynical comment that Pink's hope for someone to rescue him was only fantasy.
But it was only fantasy.
This is because the wall was too high, as you can see, and no matter how he tried, he could not break free.
No matter how he tried, he could not break free.
And as a result of his imprisonment, the worms ate into his brain. Now, the worms in the wall are an important symbol. Waters described them as a representation of the negative forces within us. If we isolate ourselves and allow these forces to run their course, we start to decay. This then leads to death, at least metaphorically. So the higher the wall grows, shutting out the sunlight with it, the more decay corrupts everything that it encloses.
And the ones ate into his brain.
Now, what's interesting here is that after his stint as the voice of the narrator, Waters finishes the song as Pink. Third person, then he's Pink. And the tone, it completely shifts. The way that Waters sings from here on out, straining his voice even, it just conveys this sense of utter desperation and agony. It feels like bankruptcy. I guess that's what decay sounds like.
Out there on the road, always doing what you're told. Can you help me?
Waters wraps up the song with pleas to those who are out there on the road, always doing what you're told, and to those who are out there beyond the wall, breaking bottles in the hall. Can you help me?
Can you help me?
Of the breaking bottles line, Waters said that it was an exhortation to come closer where I live so we can help each other. It was about community, the very antidote to the poison of isolation. But if we haven't figured out already, by the end of the song, it's very clear that Pink's cries for help are not being heard. In an anguished voice, he cries out. And then Pink concludes, perhaps ironically, or maybe in a moment of authenticity, that together we stand, divided we fall. My favorite line from a song with just brilliant lyrics. Up to this point, his life's view has been just the opposite. Alone we stand, together we fall. As the final line fades out in echo, beautiful. It is like the last call for hope is disappearing into the darkness. Has Pink lost the last of his mind? I mean, that's what we're left with. The key to tearing down Pink's wall has always been to allow for vulnerability and to reach out to others for connection. But now as Hey You comes to a close, we wonder if he's missed his chance altogether. Waters would say that Pink, at least in part, realizes what he needs, but doesn't know how to get it. And at this point, the better part of him really doesn't want to. Not yet, anyway. I mean, it's all buried really deep down, which is why he's incapable of doing anything except sitting there in a silent catatonic state. Now, there's still a long way to go before we reach the end of the album, and hopefully the end of the wall. Now, obviously, with an album as well known as this one, most people are familiar with how it ends. But for the sake of any new listeners, I'm not going to drop any spoilers. I'll just leave you with the recommendation to definitely check this album out for yourself and listen on repeat many times. It's just a masterpiece. Don't have to even say that. There's so much to absorb on this perfect album, and it's a perfect record, like I said. Without taking anything away from any of the other phenomenal songs on this record, I will say, I've always felt that Hey You is one of its most pivotal tracks. Like I mentioned earlier, this one song goes a long way in summarizing what really the entire album or record is all about. So what about Roger Waters? This song is so indicative of the wall, and the wall came into being because of disconnection with his audience. Did he ever find any peace on that matter? I mean, I think he did, which is supported by his latest interviews and videos talking to his fans. But instead of trying to read Roger Waters' mind, let me just offer some evidences to consider beyond what I've said. You know that this album made a massive impact, artistically, culturally, and in the hearts and minds of millions of individuals. A monumental tour followed the release of the album in February of 1980. I should say monumental in scope and creativity, but not necessarily in the number of shows or locations. The Wall Tour only reached Los Angeles, California, Uniondale, New York, London, England, and Dortmund, Germany, for a total of 31 shows. Logistically, it was just too complicated to take it on the road at that time. Famously, the spectacle made extensive use of stage theatrics, including large inflatable puppets and, of course, a giant wall that spanned the stage. And as the band played, the 40-foot wall of cardboard bricks gradually partitioned the band from the audience to convey the sense of alienation. It was, I tell you, the stuff of rock concert legend and maybe even a bit of sorcery. I don't know. Shortly after, a film version of Pink Floyd's The Wall premiered in London. That was in July of 1982. The finished product, of course, starred Bob Geldof as the disconnected and disillusioned rock star Pink. Though the film has received mixed reviews since its inception, for the Floyd faithful, it adds yet another powerful layer to the band's historic double album. Later, Waters would even say that the film was excellent and it fit perfectly with his original vision. So I would imagine, at the very least, creating The Wall must have been a cathartic experience for Roger Waters. Probably a healing experience, even. Now, several songs from The Wall have appeared in a number of movies and have been covered by many artists, particularly Another Brick in the Wall Part 2, and of course, Comfortably Numb.
Hello, is there anybody in there?
Hey You has had a few less appearances. It showed up in The Squid in the Well, where the character in that movie takes credit for writing the song. That was in 2005.
There we stand, divided we fall.
It's in Cold Case in 2010.
Out there in the cold, getting lonely, getting old, can you feel me?
And Due Date in 2010 as well.
Help me to carry the stone.
The Royal Philharmonic Orchestra covered it in 94. And Dream Theater did it in 2006. Great version there.
Out there in the cold.
And actually, a year before that, Billy Sherwood, formerly of Yes, released a Pink Floyd Wall tribute album called Back Against the Wall. For the track Hey You, Sherwood collaborated with a number of progressive rock artists, including John Wetton. There's also Steve Lukather, Tommy Shaw, Alan White, Gary Green, and Jeff Downs. Between all these artists, you had Yes, Asia, Styx, and Toto all represented. Very cool. Hey You is an absolutely masterful composition, one of the crown jewels of the revered Pink Floyd catalog. Emotionally, not many Floyd tracks can better it. It's a song that no doubt many of you have listened to and felt very deeply. The magnitude of its healing cannot be overstated. So here's my story. Like you, this song has certainly lifted me out of the sea of despair and desolation. It's just the perfect song for those long, dark times that test one's soul. I remember I was 16 years old, and my world was falling down all around me. I was at odds with my parents. I remember we'd gotten into this big knockout, drag-out fight, and they kicked me out of the house. Remember, I spent a couple of nights in my car, and after that, I lived with my friend for a while. At that same time, my girlfriend had broken up with me, left me for another guy. I was on the verge of a complete mental breakdown. Now, granted, when we're 16 years old, things seem 20 times worse than they really are. Very dramatic, but we remember it well when looking back how hard it was. And this song, it saved me.
Hey you, would you help me to carry the stone?
Hey You was truly a life preserver on that devastating, deeply depressing evening when the world was closing in on me, and I really didn't know if I'd make it to the morning. I was in dire straits. I survived that night only by the grace of this song, especially Roger Waters' a heart-wrenching plea at the end of the song where he says, "Hey you, don't tell me that there's no hope at all. Together we stand, divided we fall." And as I laid in my car on the side of the road in the early hours of that dreadful morning, remember I sat up and I screamed those lyrics along with Roger Waters. I was in tears, I was in agony, I was in anger, resounding melancholy. And all of a sudden, that sad song, that depressing song became an anthem. Like I was standing over my demons declaring that they weren't going to take my soul. I was going to take control of my life and fight for something better. I was going to survive. That was a turning point in my young life, I have to say. I had a few of those moments, turning points with music. The funny thing is, Pink Floyd was a part of most of them. Leave us a comment about Pink Floyd and Hey You. What are your memories of this song? It's so good. It's such a, I don't even know how to put it into words. Share your experiences, your thoughts on The Wall. Let us know in the comments. Let's have a good discussion about it. If you like this episode, be sure to watch our Pink Floyd installments, including 2 other episodes about The Wall, Comfortably Numb, and Another Brick in the Wall Part 2. I'll put the links in the description so it's easy to do. Don't forget to subscribe if you haven't already. We'd love to have you as part of our community. Until next time, 3 chords and the truth, my friends.